Hi, I'm Charlotte and this is Tired Mama Tries to Read. So, welcome. Hi, it's 2 years since I started this channel. I only realised the other day. It was probably back in July actually that it was 2 years, but June and July, like much of the pandemic, has been kind of blurry, and also there was lots of really amazing stuff going on with Black Lives Matter, and I was just massively focused on reading and watching Black BookTube, so I haven't really given it much thought, but I've decided that I will celebrate my 2 years. I didn't celebrate my 1 year particularly well because I can't remember what it was. Something was happening then as well. So yes, 2 years. I'm just going to do a Q&A video. Really simple. I did look up to see if I could find like a Meet the Booktuber type video where I could take some questions, but I thought it would be way more interesting if you guys asked me some questions. So if you have anything that you want to know within reason, please put it in the comments below. Moving swiftly on, because I do want this to be a quick video, just so that, you know, you've got time to watch other people's videos, because this is a busy world we live in. I have almost read 2 books. I've been super slow at reading. I don't know, again, is this a pandemic thing? Is it a lockdown thing? In the UK, we've massively eased the lockdown, but because we care for a vulnerable adult as part of our day-to-day job, because he lives with us, we feel hugely responsible, obviously, for his well-being and his health, and we just don't feel comfortable doing any of the things that other people seem to be doing. So we are kind of still in lockdown in my house. You know, yesterday was the first time that I went into an actual shop in 5 months. And it was unpleasant. We went into Wyvale, which is a gardening shop, because we did genuinely need some stuff for our garden for over the winter. And, you know, we just thought, right, let's just do it. Otherwise, I am never going to be able to go out into the public world again. So we did do it, and, you know, we survived, but I didn't like it. Still find it fairly staggering that you could walk into a shop without a mask. You know, just the lack of respect that you're showing to the people that work there, for a start, blows my mind. We've got a really small rate of coronavirus in Wales, but to me, you know, we're still in the pandemic. What does it cost you to put a mask on? Like nothing, you know? So obviously there's a physical cost to a mask, but trust me, anyone going into Wyvale can afford to buy a mask. So anyway, we did that. I don't think we'll be doing that again. You know, we went and got compost, and, you know, I think we're set really. Everything else, even food shopping, we have been clicking and collecting. So yeah, it's been weird, and I just don't feel like I can read still. Sometimes I seem to fall into a book and I'm really enjoying it, but there's definitely, I'm losing, not the pleasure of reading, but I'm finding it hard to relax just generally. And yeah, living in a house with other people who are in lockdown and are all, you know, got a child who has not played with any of his friends for over 5 months. He's not played with another child for 5 months. Obviously the gentleman that lives with us is not able to go to any of his clubs or any of the things that he enjoys. And Stephen and I have been out for like a drive. Like I say, Wyvale was the first time we have stepped out of the car together, apart from we did go to the tip one time. Yeah, so it's trying times, and I think that does affect your reading, and it's definitely affected me. So when Black Lives Matter was and it still is going on, make no mistake, when there was that massive push, I just read tons of social justice issue books, and I especially read books that were related to my job, which is to work in museums and galleries. And my last video, head over there if you want to see some of those reviews, because I've read some great stuff. But I needed to calm it down. I was feeling mentally really blocked. I'm still feeling it, if I'm completely honest. And for me, there is a real, I have a real clashing of, I'm quite a sciencey, not that I'm good at science, but I believe in the truth. Okay, so I believe in reality and there being evidence for things. You know, I vaccinate my child, for instance, but I also have a tendency towards spirituality, and because those two things often clash, I find it hard to find a book that fits those things, if you know what I mean. I don't like anybody to be scathing of spirituality or religious belief. I think it's really abhorrent and unnecessary to be like that, to mock people for things that make them feel good. when it affects nobody is, you know, pretty horrible and mean. And I see it quite a lot on the internet, which is nice. But similarly, I also don't like the fact that spirituality, and, you know, I can't speak for religion because I'm not religious, but tends to ignore the fact. I just saw Stephen poke his head out of the shed then and then think, oh, she's filming. It can't come out. Spirituality denies the fact that there's a great amount of suffering in the world that cannot be solved by crystals, and it cannot be solved by positive thinking. And it's not a case of, you know, we all just need to be nicer to each other and stop being angry. There's a huge place for anger in the world, and yeah, I think that that's why I find that the two things that I follow in life clash. So I try and find something that fits, and not a lot of things do, but I have found Sharon Blackie. This is my second book by Sharon Blackie. This is The Enchanted Life, Unlocking the Magic of the Everyday. And if you're looking at it and thinking that's a little bit too woo, it does look very woo. They've done a woo cover. Sharon Blackie is educated in the world of true, and she's a clinical psychologist. She worked for multinational companies by the sound of it. You know, she was doing pretty good, and then she decided to connect with her spirituality. She has a really strong affinity with Celtic myths. She is Irish, I believe, by family, but I think she grew up in England, so she identifies really strongly with Irish myth, but she includes a lot of Welsh myth, English myth. You know, there's lots of stuff going in there, Scottish stuff as well. So she's really interesting, and she loves the power of the story. And isn't that why we all love to read? You know, I think there's definitely a reason why we all love reading fiction, and that's because we just cannot stop telling stories. And she addresses that in this book, which I really enjoyed. Also in this book, she corrects some of the, wasn't necessarily a mistake, but there were omissions in her first book that I read, which was If Women Rose Rooted. She talks about LGBT issues very briefly, but there is there's a good few paragraphs on it which I found reassuring, that she is taking part in a social discussion that, you know, is ongoing. There's also some stuff about asylum seekers. She also addresses a major issue that I had with the first one, which was this idea of being connected to a place because you're from it and you're connected to it by blood. I find that kind of talk really disturbing, and it fits into a kind of UKIP mentality of, you know, we were here and we get the land, we understand the land, it literally speaks to us and no one else. She addresses that in this. Not as strongly as I'd hoped, but certainly to the point where I feel that she talks about it in her personal life. She's read about it, and I feel like she's more engaged with it now, which was really, if she hadn't done it in this book, I think I would have given up on her. So I found that really reassuring. On the whole, it's just chapter after chapter of really interesting stories that are tied into, you know, myths that have been, oh, fly, oh no, wasp, we'll just ignore it. I don't think I've ever been stung by a wasp. I've been stung by a bee a few times. Wasps tend to avoid me. That was about as close as they get. Okay, I just really enjoyed it, so I could go into it more. I think if you go for a walk in the woods and you want to look around you and feel like you're part of nature rather than just a human being walking through the woods, I think this is the book for you. Then I went on to, what's the time on this? 8 minutes 59. How do I do it? Okay, Memoir of a Witch by Amanda Yates Garcia. Sorry, the full title is Initiated. This is, if you took all the witchcraft out of it, this would be a really interesting coming of age, journey into adulthood story of a young woman in America who has had a very rough start in life. She's been abused. She's left home really early because of men that have come into her and her mother's lives that have been abusive and inappropriate with her. She is then entered into sex work in order to get by, and she sort of travelled the world she calls herself a fairy, you know, she's running. It feels a lot of the time that she's running, and although she isn't in a massively drug-addled haze while she's doing it, she enters into worlds that brush up against that. And I haven't quite finished it yet. I'm about 50 pages from the end. I've gone back and forth with it. It opens incredibly strongly with a story of her from the present, where she's out in the desert, going through a Wiccan ritual, and it's really strong, because it just talks about, for me, again, if you took the magic out of it, it talks about the ways in which women have to operate in this world all the time. I, include myself in this. So she's out in the desert and she's in a sheer cotton dress, and she's thinking, not that she's afraid of coyotes and all the things that could come and get her, she's afraid of men. She knows that men go out into the desert to get drunk, to do drugs. And she says, like most women and femmes, witches are familiar with the demons of patriarchy. They follow us everywhere, even out into the desert wilderness. We can't be alone in our rights. The shadow of violence falls unbidden, and for many of us, just the threat of it, the lifetime of warnings to be careful, the accumulation of micro and macro assaults, are enough to keep us home safe under the protective aegis of the... Aegis, have I said that right? Of the patriarchal father gods. Every time I saw headlights advancing along the horizon, or heard the low growl of a motorcycle bounce off the canyon walls, I fought the urge to run and hide. But I would not be chased from my magic by bad boy bros who thought they owned the world. I was there on principle. I was there out of a commitment to create the kind of world I wanted to live in. A world where witches raise power in the desert. A world where a woman could chant hymns to the goddess, miles away from civilization, without worrying that she might be attacked. So I chanted my incantations and spattered my libations into the red earth, and tried not to think about how I'd never had to test my magic against men who, should they appear, I felt sure would have guns. I love that beginning, and I have to say, so far in the middle of the book, it hasn't necessarily matched that strong start. But I feel like the end is going to push me back into that. I mean, it is a journey, and I think it's my expectations of what was to come, kind of less about witchy stuff and more about just her biography and what happened to her, which was absolutely interesting in itself, but not any kind of lifestyle that I could relate to, which, as much as we want to say and as much as I want to learn about other people's experiences, you're never going to be able to connect to something as strongly as if somebody is saying something that you could have literally, said yourself, which I think is why the first part stood out to me, because every time I go for a walk in the woods, I'm not afraid of anything in the woods. I'm afraid of men. And, being married to a wonderful person, a wonderful man, and being the mother of a boy doesn't make that any less so. It makes me frustrated that there are so many things that I feel I can't do. I can't go running, day or night. I genuinely don't feel safe running. I walked the dogs on my own last week, and as I was just coming down the street into my gate, I was wolf whistled from a car. That's just you can't be a woman in this world without being a body, without being this over-sexualized body. And she addresses that, and she goes through it in this book. She really does. So again, I haven't finished it yet, but I feel like I would, recommend it. And I heard about that from Sharon, of course, from Sharon of Storytime, because she reads super cool books. So I'm just going to finish off now that I've gone on my little rant with two books that I had delivered to me from the lovely Kate at Harris & Harris Books. I will put a link to her website below, and I'll try and put a link to her Facebook, because she does these really cool unboxings. I've talked about these before. When you're a bookseller and you open a box of books, it is super exciting, even though you've done it 1,000 times. Even if you've actually ordered the books that are in that box, you know exactly what's coming. The smell that comes out of the box and just the feeling of excitement to have the books in your hand is something special, and it's something that Kate, after all the years that she's been bookselling, she still has and she conveys. So if you don't have a local bookshop that you are particularly fond of or feel an affinity to, but you do want to shop in a kind of conscious way where you're trying to keep bookstores alive, I will put a link to Kate's website, and you can order through her via email, via phone. I do it via WhatsApp, because we're best buds. And, I'm sorry, I know she puts little tiny biscuits in my in my book packages. Maybe she'll do the same for you. I don't know. I was very excited to open these books and find that there were little biscuits in between. Anyway, So I've got White Rage, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide. Continuing my education. This book is written by a black woman, Carol Anderson. I think White Fragility is really up there with the reads that everyone is doing. That is written by a white woman, somebody D'Angelo. My dad's reading it and says it's amazing, but I have heard lots of criticism on the internet because it's written by a white woman. And I don't know how much further that criticism goes. Put something in the comments if you know anything else about why potentially that book is not the right one to read. But I think there's room for both for me. I certainly think white people need to put some work into educating ourselves. So I'm happy in that sense that D'Angelo's written her book, but I'd be interested to see what Anderson says. And I also had Such a Fun Age arrive by Kiley Reid. So I've kind of resisted this book. I don't know why. I feel sometimes when things are like hot off the press, I get a little bit put off, partly because I know everyone's going to be reading it and no one's necessarily, you know, if you're watching videos and everyone's talking about the same books, it can get a little bit repetitive, and I don't want to add to that, especially when other people are probably going to do a way better job of reviewing something than me. But I finally fell for the hype. Yes, the whole I don't want to say drama because that makes it sound light, but the situation that happened with Reading Rush has kind of put it in the headlights. That's not the right word. Spotlight. Let's put it in the spotlight again. And yeah, there are plenty of people who've shared their opinions on that. I'm happy to share my opinion on the Reading Rush situation, but we are now on 16 minutes, so I won't do it in this video. But if you want to talk to me about that, you can direct message me on Instagram, or you can put a comment below and I will talk about that with you. Let's read it. If you've got it on your shelves, pick it up. Let's do it. I think this might be one of my next ones. I feel like I've agreed to a buddy read with this. Have I agreed to a buddy read with any of you? Let me know. Right, I'm gonna go. It was meant to be 10 minutes. I never seem to be able to do that. So yes, just repeating what I said at the start. If you have any questions for a Q&A, put them down there as well. I'm done. I'm gonna go and do some work now. I have lots of work to do. I took the week off last week, so I've got loads to do. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know how you're doing under the lockdown in your country of origin. I know I got loads of you from the US, and I know stuff is really bad in the US, so state by state I know it differs wildly, so let me know how it's going, and I hope you guys are all just staying safe. Okay, see you later. Bye.